So I want to continue the discussion that's been going on about creativity, hardship, and value. And I found so much of the things that were said to be interesting, provocative, and I really do value some of the ways that Gary, Fred, others have engaged. Some of the comments that have trailed through the discussion about it, I think, is also very fascinating. And so here are the things I want to say. First off, I don't think that at any point I'm advocating unnecessary suffering. I'm not saying, oh yeah, let's all get together and suffer and then make the best of it. Uh, any more than I think that, I'm not sure, but I don't think that Gary is saying, his philosophy can be summed up as life sucks and then you die. I don't know, maybe that is. I think, one of the comments that a person left, or it was on a person's page, which is life would be irredeemable if it weren't for music, or something like that. Like, if it weren't for music, life would be unjustified. Something like that. I guess a Nietzsche line. I think there is, and also, I'm not going to take offense, I don't care, but somebody's going to tell me that I grew up with privilege, or I was some person who grew up in elite schools. Do your homework. I'm not going to sit here and try to make a big laundry list. I think what's, to me, most interesting about some of that discussion and how this, and I do appreciate the video response on meritocracy and how we do live in this society where we think people deserve what they get, and that's especially a sort of bourgeois belief by the elites who have been privileged and then want to claim that people deserve what they get. I'm much more aligned with the Stoics and people like Alain de Botton. I think to really recognize that so much that what happens to us is a mix and a combination of happenstance and luck, and also how much we do strive and work really hard. I think the task is to be able to do both, to really work hard, to struggle, and yet to realize that so much of what happens is beyond one's control. And I do have other videos on that. I think the things that I would want to say is, and again, the importance of the Stoics here is that two of the great voices of ancient Stoicism are Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius. One was a person utterly destitute who was lamed. Never, I guess he took a woman and they adopted a boy, but he was a slave, was very badly abused. Marcus Aurelius was an emperor, a ruler, and both of them saw a kind of truth about human psychology, which was that affluence and comfort and ease doesn't necessarily make you happy, and that the Stoics, Epictetus, he realized that being destitute and without possessions and of not particularly great health doesn't necessarily mean that your life will be misery. I think, and again, it's not advocating misery for misery's sake. The question is, how do we respond to our own self-aware suffering? There is a kind of cold, lonely whimpering in the dark, the inarticulate cry, and then there is an artistic response to the suffering that is inevitable. To that suffering that is inevitable. Is it inevitable? Now, I'm not sure, but it seemed like some people wanted to suggest that the promise of virtual reality is that one day we won't have to suffer. And this is where I think the Becker stuff starts to become interesting. I think there is a need for self-worth and self-value, and there's a kind of death fear that is lurking in there, but it's also a kind of guilt that comes from recognizing that all of life is a gift. Again, I go back to Dennis Gabor. I had him yesterday. Here, he's on 51, and he's talking about the history of human sacrifice and how much sacrifice has played a role. And for him, he says, I see no evidence that this basic feeling of guilt can be eradicated by those who have it, not by any methods known to us. And he's not talking about an individual wrongdoing. He's talking about the historical guilt that dawned upon the organism who was self-aware to the degree that it could recognize the gift character of existence. I think that's what a lot of this is about. To see that there are different responses that we take to our self-aware finitude. The fact that we are self-aware and will die. Some people take what could be called a homicidal response. They look at themselves, they do a stab and grab, and they just go and they try to take only for themselves. They're only worried about themselves, and they think that if they devour and consume and exercise their power and expand their power, that will be the best for them. And again, this is sort of their response to it. I think there is another, rather than the homicidal person who just worries only for themselves and just devours outwardly, there is a kind of suicidal, unfortunately. This is a person who joins a cause. It's the true believer, and they're willing to take out other people as they take themselves out. And we see this is the rise of terrorism. A wonderful video that was just posted in the reading group on Ernest Becker, death denial, and genocide, and forms of ethnic cleansing and terrorism that goes on through people's identifying with groups and trying to deny their own limitations. This is a kind of suicidal motive that sometimes people take to the response of life's hardships and its sufferings. I think there is a third one, though, and this is what could be called mortification. Mortification is living a dying life. To live a dying life is to try to bring beauty and harmony and love to everything around you, to watch your own mind when it lashes out toward others, to try to understand your own motives. But I think to accept the hardships to the best that you can by turning them into sources of, I guess, of understanding, of wisdom. I think part of it is there's a cosmological backdrop in here, right? I think part of and this is maybe the lurking atheism / theism that's maybe in the backdrop for me anyway. I think some of the mythology would be that there was the grand nothingness who couldn't go anywhere, couldn't do anything, couldn't experience anything because it was without any distances, and it lost itself. That is sort of like if you were all powerful, the one thing you couldn't ever know is possibility. Like imagine just saying it that way. Like imagine being infinitely powerful, and the one thing you couldn't know is mystery, hardship, difference, death, loss. And so all of the world is a kind of dream in the mind of the cosmic consciousness that we are the way that the universe sort of haunts itself so that possibilities could come into being, and its distance and hardship. And I think the more that one sees oneself as the cosmos itself and disidentifies with ego, it changes the tenor of the hardships. I'm not advocating hardship, and I'm certainly not advocating let's all goose step together and call World War II our great experiences, or to become a suicide bomber for the sake of meaning. I'm arguing strongly against any such talk. I'm trying to say that it's sort of like the universe itself is guilty. It's guilty of having made possible beings who were self-aware and who could die. And it's not like we're guilty and we need God to forgive us. It's more like God needs us to be the priests to forgive him. And again, the language is all goofy. I don't mean a being. There's no creator, no guy in the sky. If anything, as I said, in the beginning there was nothing, and then the nothing said no to itself. And as it said no to itself, the something emerged. The nothing was never eradicated. And now the nothingness is the room making that allows all of the stuff to have perspective and to have meaning. I realize all that's probably an odd philosophical backdrop for what I think is part of the beauty and the radiance of the human world is the imagination. And I think I'm not saying, is there any escape from technological advancement? No. I think we're going to have to accept it. But let's not imagine that you're ever going to make education better by a pill. You're not going to somehow remove the difficulties of learning by making it easier. There are some difficulties that are more like winds for our sails. They're not obstacles per se. They're shaping stones. Thanks.